One of the things that Great Dixter is most known for is its incredible succession planting. There are parts of that long border particularly, and a whole lot of other sections of the garden as well, where there are layer upon layer of plants in such a way that it's just this constant march throughout the seasons of another thing coming on, another thing replacing it, another thing replacing it. And I was so excited to find that that is the content of the first ever online Great Dixter Symposium. So I thought I'd have a chat to Fergus Garrett a little bit more to ask him a bit more about this fabulous course. Hey, Ferg.
Hi, Michael. We're having a discussion on whether we should be leaving the dishcloth hanging up or in the sink in the restroom. Yeah, so step outside, Michael.
That's the best.
How are you, mate?
Very well indeed. And you?
Yeah, not too. Can you? Have I gone out of zone? Can you
No.
see me all right?
No, I can see just fine. So Ferg, Christo was an absolute genius at this idea of succession planting, which really he brought about, I think probably along with, say, Pam and Sybil at Sissinghurst through the 80s and 90s. He was really forging a new path, wasn't he, with thinking through this idea of strong succession planting.
Well, I think an element of this has been practiced in gardens for ages, Mike. It's happened, I think it's just good gardening. But what he did is that he distilled all of these things and produced that wonderful book, which took all of these ideas, pulled them together, and presented them in a concentrated way. I think the fact that people have grown snowdrops in their garden or cyclamen in their garden and so on, that's all been a part of succession planting.
Yeah, look, I guess you're right. I know that you're exactly right. It was interesting. I had a chance to have lunch with Pam and Sybil from Sissinghurst, who gardened there from 1959 through till 1990. And I asked them about what their drive was towards such extraordinary succession planting that they achieved in the late 80s. And they said to me, well, look, it was driven by visitor numbers. So I put the same question to Christo, who just went, "Oh, it's just because I'm greedy. I just want more per square meter. I'm not faintly interested in visitor numbers. It's just about pleasing myself." And it was something that he really drove, wasn't it? So a garden that was just working so hard per square meter, possibly harder than any garden had been pushed in the past.
Well, and I think there is its relevance to smaller spaces and to smaller gardens, in that it's about maximizing, your use of space. And of course, this happens in nature, where there's layer after layer after layer, whether they're in meadows or woodland, woodland areas. These plant communities are multi-layered, and you're just mimicking that in a space, whether or not that space is a 6-acre space or a space that's 15 meters square. It doesn't matter. The principles apply to both of those. You can scale up or scale down, but it's actually more relevant if your garden is 15 meters square, because you want to maximize what you get out of it. Also, Mike, I think it's really important that people they take in that word hard-working garden. You mentioned that, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be digging out dahlias and putting wallflowers and tulips and then digging out something else and it's not that succession planting doesn't mean that. There's an element of that bedding, if you like, or use of annuals, biennials, that comes into a long season garden. But a lot of it is about good plant choice, so that you can have plants living in a community with one following another and sharing the same space. And that's the main principles of it. Of course, I'll talk about the whole wider thing, from self-sowers to the way we filter through annuals, but the main bulk of this is about getting a long season through these communities.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it is really relevant to any ecological system, isn't it? I mean, it's something that because it's been so well practiced in the UK, well, let's say it's reached its peak in the UK, that it's easy to assume that you need to have that kind of climate for it to work. But it's really relevant to any climate, isn't it?
It is, but you know what? I don't think it's reached its peak at all. I think very few people grasp the opportunities that they've got in their garden. Because look, I'm looking ahead of me, and there's an area full of bare soil in front of me, whereas that should have cyclamen and snowdrops in front. You know, there's always those opportunities. I think where it's reached its peak is out in the wild. You know, when you go, whether you go to LA, or whether you go to New Jersey or Istanbul, or or Melbourne, out in the wild, this is where it's reached its peak, where you've got this extraordinary range of communities that happen. And some communities are less dense than others. So if you take a desert community, it's not dense, is it? But whereas if you take a woodland community in north on the east coast of the United States, or in here, it's very dense. You know, it's multi-layered, all of that. And I think the gardeners haven't mimicked the wild enough in this. They've mimicked the wild in terms of the way they move plants and plant high density and low density, run things through. But in terms of layers, they haven't mimicked the wild, because people are just frightened about putting plants close together and thinking, well, thinking that everything needs space around it. And actually, when you love the wild, and I love the wild, when you go out into these wild communities, you realize how resilient plants are and how things can survive in these communities.
Yes, but it's quite a shift, isn't it, from traditional horticultural thinking?
Of course it is, because you go to school, and I was doing this yesterday. I was cutting back and mulching an area, and it looks fantastic because it's just full of this beautiful mulch. And I thought, what on earth have I done there? I would have I've just switched off and gone back to my school days to horticulture. I just thought it was just thoughtless of me to do that, because it was the easy thing to do. So you have to come out of your comfort zone to actually do something, leave leaves on, and so it goes away. You have to come out of your comfort zone to do this. But you can do it in a gentle way. You can do it with a winter flowering bulb amongst a summer active perennial. It's just a single layer.
Yes.
And then just build that up. You don't have to do the 8 layers that we're trying to attempt. And also, Michael, the important thing is that it's and you've mentioned this before, it's all about the principle, isn't it? It's all about principle, because we may be able to do 7, 8 layers amongst perennials of just things that come and go. But you take that to Alaska, they're not going to be able to do that. But the principle, they could do 3 layers because the seasons are different. You go somewhere else, seasons are different. You may do 5 layers using completely different plants. It doesn't matter that the plants are different. It's the fact that you're simulating what happens in wild communities where things are on top of each other and sharing the same space. That doesn't mean you don't grow prize-winning begonias, because I quite like doing that as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, look, I'm just so excited that you are taking your symposium now internationally, because you've been doing them for, 25 years or so at Dixter, and that you've had those lovely little roundtable discussions in the Yeoman's Hall, and now going online and broad scale and global. And I'm just so excited about that. But I'm just wondering if you can tell us then how this works. What is the setup of the period of time of this symposium goes for?
Well, it's all the sessions are going to be recorded. Okay, so my lecture sessions are going to be recorded. So what we've got 5 sessions starting in January, February, March, April, May. One session. So and in each month there are 2 sessions. One is a 2-hour lecture, which is a recorded lecture that you get sent at the beginning of the month. And then you're allowed a period of 2 weeks where you can submit questions. And then at the end of the month, we have a live question and answer session, which obviously due to time zones, not everybody could join. But I quite used to like getting up and watching Muhammad Ali fight Joe Frazier in the middle of the night. So people could always get up in the middle of the night and join if they want to. And so there's live question and answer sessions, which also will be recorded and sent out to all the participants. The participants will get um, uh, perhaps a video of all those live question and answer sessions, or they may get a video of me drawing out a low maintenance multi-season border and putting the layers on layer by layer. So I have, a range of plants I draw out, and then I discuss the first layer, the second layer, the third layer, the fourth layer, and then we analyze how much extra work that puts on to your gardening year, so and then we can stretch it to make it higher maintenance or even lower maintenance, and so on. So all of these sessions, some of those will be live, but everything will be recorded and sent out to the participants. So it's five sessions. All the details are on our website, and it's cumulative, so that the first session's about soil, how we plant, whether we compost or not compost. Then we look at long season plants. What do we look for in a long season plant? And then we look at contrast, shape, and texture, and how we put all of those things together. So even though things may not be in flower, the garden still looks interesting as a result of the shapes and the foliage, which is, something, say in Australia, you do a lot of, because of the sort of vegetation that you can use. So that's the first session. The second session is about the layers that we can put in, the bulb layers, or plants sharing the same space, and so it just goes on. The third session is about self sowing, the influence of self sowers. The fourth session is about things like those ephemerals that come in and out, and climbers. And then the fifth sessions, we do, I think, 3 borders that are multi-season, but one for shade, one for sun, and another one for sun, where we use a range of plants. We look at their Achilles heel where they're not doing good stuff, and we look at how we plug the gaps using a number of plants. And all of those maps will be sent out to you. Those drawings will be sent out with plant lists as well. So I think by the time it finishes, you get a real understanding of the whole subject, and from it you can pick and choose what you want.
Fabulous. Well, look, as someone who tapped into Dixter in the early 90s, where Christo had taken that thinking to a certain place, and then since then you've just taken it to a whole new level. And as far as I'm concerned, there is nobody better in the world to be teaching the principles of this than you. And so I just really want to commend this course so highly to any of our listeners or anyone watching this video now. I think it's going to be incredible. And there's going to be so much take-home power out of this to transform your garden. So thank you so much for taking this worldwide.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Thanks a lot. Nice to see your beautiful face.
And yours, buddy. So there's Fergus Garrett, and nobody better in the world to teach this stuff. So if that interests you, look, and it won't interest everybody, but there are people who need to know this. There are people who are hungry to learn this stuff, and there is no better place to go to learn it. So either go to the Great Dixter website, just do a Google search, or click the link in my bio, and it will take you to further information.